Welcome to Bedtime Sleep Stories for Grown-Ups by bzbshoney.net. I hope you are settled in for the night and are ready to go on a journey of deep and relaxing sleep. We've put these special bedtime sleep stories for adults for anyone out there dealing with insomnia, sleep problems, sleep deprivation, anxiety, pain, or any other kind of issues preventing you from getting enough sleep and being fully rested and ready to take on the day. We truly hope these stories can help you achieve the elusive, deep, and uninterrupted sleep. Please enjoy this episode and consider subscribing to our channel to support and help the spread of these sleep stories to people all over the world with the same issues that brought you to this video. Thank you for your support and a deep and uninterrupted sleep to you tonight. Let's begin. As the hologram faded, the heroes stood in silence. The weight of their mission, the enormity of their task, hung heavily in the air. Each of them felt the gnawing tendrils of fear, but they also felt a burgeoning sense of resolve. They had been chosen, and they would not fail. As they exited the palace, their minds abuzz with the oracle's prophecy, they were met with the sight of Zephyros at dawn. The first rays of the sun cast long shadows across the landscape, the beauty of the scene a stark contrast to the darkness that lay ahead. The spectral figure had escaped, but they knew they would face him again. They would be ready. The profound lesson that echoes through this part of the story is the concept of duty and acceptance of responsibility. Our heroes, despite their fear and uncertainty, chose to embrace their roles as defenders of Zephyros, understanding that their actions could make a difference. This parallels the importance of stepping up and taking responsibility in our own lives, recognizing that we each have a role to play in shaping our world. As they set off, the palace of Zephyros at their backs, a sense of dread descended upon them. The spectral figure was still out there, biding his time. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over, and as they ventured into the unknown, they couldn't help but wonder, would they be too late? As the group of heroes left the palace behind, they set their sights on the first destination of their journey, the ancient library of Solara, home to countless volumes of arcane knowledge and lore. It was here that they hoped to find clues to the location of the sword that the oracle had spoken of. Their journey was fraught with challenges. They faced bandits on the highways, magical beasts in the forests, and treacherous terrain in the mountains. Yet, with each obstacle they only grew stronger, their resolve hardened by the trials they faced. They were a diverse group, each with their unique strengths and weaknesses, yet they worked in harmony, their differences complementing each other rather than causing discord. Despite the dangers they faced, there were also moments of beauty. The sight of a sunrise over the green expanse of the Great Plains, the sound of a crystal-clear river flowing through a forest, the feel of a cool breeze on a hot day. These moments served as a reminder of what they were fighting for, the preservation of their beautiful world against the encroaching darkness. In the midst of their journey, a profound lesson began to take shape. It was the power of unity, of standing together despite their differences. They realized that their strength did not come from their individual abilities, but from their collective effort. They learned to rely on each other, to trust in their companions, and to work together towards a common goal. This lesson mirrored the importance of unity and collaboration in our own lives. Despite our differences, when we work together, we can achieve far greater things than when we work alone. As the days turned into weeks, they finally reached the city of Solara, a beacon of light in the midst of a world that seemed to be increasingly consumed by darkness. The city was a marvel, with its towering spires and gleaming walls, and at its heart was the library, a grand structure that dwarfed all others. They made their way towards it, their hearts filled with hope and trepidation. But as they neared the library, an ominous feeling washed over them. A strange silence hung in the air, and the usually bustling streets were eerily empty. The grand doors of the library stood ajar, an unnatural darkness seeping out from within. As they stepped inside, the sense of unease grew. The library, usually filled with the sounds of whispered conversations and rustling pages, was silent. And then they saw it. In the center of the grand hall, a figure cloaked in shadows, the spectral figure they had encountered at the palace. He turned towards them, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Welcome," he said, his voice echoing in the vast hall. "I've been expecting you." The figure in the shadows was known to them. He had haunted their dreams since the oracle's prophecy, a specter from a forgotten age. His name was Asmodeus, a sorcerer of old, once banished, but now returned with an unknown but undoubtedly malevolent purpose. The heroes, though startled, were not unprepared. They had faced trials in their journey, bandits, beasts, and treacherous terrain, all of which had only served to harden their resolve and sharpen their skills. Now they stood united in the heart of Solara, prepared to defend the sacred library and its knowledge at all costs. Asmodeus, however, was not alone. From the shadows behind him emerged hordes of nightmarish creatures, their forms twisting and shifting in the dim light of the library. The heroes readied themselves for the battle, their hearts pounding in their chests. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the first real test of their resolve. The battle that ensued was fierce and relentless. The heroes fought with all their strength, their spells and swords clashing against the darkness. The library, once a place of tranquility and wisdom, was now a battlefield, the air filled with the sounds of combat and the scent of magic. Amidst the chaos, there was a moment of clarity. It came to the heroes in the form of a realization, a profound lesson that had been forming throughout their journey. They realized that their strength was not in their swords or spells, but in their unity. Despite their differences, they stood together, stronger than they ever could be alone. It was a lesson about the power of unity and friendship, the strength of a common purpose, and the importance of standing together in the face of adversity. It was a lesson they would carry with them beyond the battlefield, a reminder of their true strength. As the battle raged on, they started gaining the upper hand. One by one, Asmodeus's minions fell, their monstrous forms disintegrating into shadows. The heroes, though tired and battered, were winning. But just as they thought the end was near, Asmodeus conjured a spell, the air crackling with its power. Suddenly the library was plunged into darkness. When the light returned, Asmodeus was gone. In his place was a swirling portal, its surface shimmering like quicksilver, and in front of it stood one of their own, a look of betrayal on their face. "I'm sorry," they said, their voice choked with emotion, "but I have no choice." And with that, they stepped into the portal, the swirling surface closing behind them, leaving the heroes in stunned silence. The silence in the library of Solara was deafening. The echoes of battle still hung in the air, but the heroes were in stunned disbelief. The dust had settled, and the reality of their companion's betrayal was beginning to sink in. They stood, watching the spot where their friend had vanished into the portal, the shimmering gateway to an unknown fate. The first one to break the silence was Tiberius, the hardened warrior with a heart of gold. His voice was a mere whisper, filled with disbelief. "Why?" he murmured, his gaze fixed on the spot where their companion had vanished. His hand instinctively clenched around the hilt of his sword, the knuckles turning white. Tiberius was a man of action, of battles and wars. Betrayal, especially from a comrade, was a blow he wasn't prepared for. Elara, the elven mage, was next to speak. Her emerald eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, were dull and teary. "We have to go after them," she said, determination creeping into her voice. Despite the pain of betrayal, she was ready to fight, to face whatever lay beyond that portal to save their friend. And so they rallied, each processing the shock in their way. There was anger, confusion, and sorrow, but beneath it all was a glimmer of hope. The bonds they'd formed on their journey were strong. They chose to believe in their friend, to fight for them, and bring them back. Their decision made, they turned to the daunting task at hand. The portal Asmodeus had conjured was gone, but they were in the library of Solara, a place teeming with ancient knowledge and magic. If there was a way to reopen the portal, they would find it here. As the group began their search, they discovered that the library was not just a repository of knowledge, but a maze of puzzles and secrets. The books were organized in a manner that defied logic, and the shelves seemed to shift and move when they weren't looking. The air thrummed with magic, a constant reminder of the power contained within these ancient walls. Despite the challenges, they persevered, fueled by their determination and their faith in their friend. They split up, each tackling a section of the library, poring over ancient texts, maps, and scrolls, hoping to find a clue that could help them reopen the portal. Hours turned into days as they researched tirelessly, their bodies running on adrenaline and their minds on sheer will. Every so often, They would reconvene, sharing their findings and piecing together the fragments of knowledge they had gathered. The process was grueling, but they refused to give up. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they found what they were looking for. It was Tiberius who made the discovery, buried within an ancient tome titled The Portals of the Ancients. With a cry of triumph, he summoned the others, and together they deciphered the ancient language, uncovering a ritual that could, in theory, reopen the portal. The sense of accomplishment was short-lived, however, replaced by a sense of dread as they realized the cost of the ritual. The text spoke of a sacrifice of the heart, a vague and ominous requirement that sent a chill down their spines. But with no alternatives, they had no choice but to proceed. They prepared for the ritual, each dealing with their fears and doubts in their own way. As they came together, ready to face whatever the ritual would demand, they were united by a single thought: their friend was worth the risk. And so they began, their voices echoing through the library as they chanted the ancient incantation. The air around them crackled with energy, the power of their combined wills bending reality to their command. As the ritual progressed, they could feel the very fabric of reality shifting around them, their senses heightened to an almost unbearable degree. The magic surged through them, an awe-inspiring and terrifying force that threatened to consume them. But they held firm, their determination unwavering. Then, without warning, the ritual reached its climax. The magic flared, a brilliant light filling the library, blinding them momentarily. When they could see again, they found themselves standing before the portal, its swirling vortex beckoning them. But something was wrong. The portal flickered, unstable, and they could feel the magic waning. It was then that they realized the horrifying truth. The sacrifice of the heart was not a metaphorical one. The ritual required a life. The realization hit them like a physical blow, their hopes crashing down around them. They looked at each other, horror and despair mirrored in their eyes. No one spoke, the silence echoing louder than any words could. It was a choice no one should ever have to make. Finally, it was Tiberius who broke the silence. He was the oldest among them, a seasoned wizard who had lived a full life. His voice was steady as he spoke, his decision clear. "I will do it," he said simply, meeting each of their gazes with a sad smile. There were protests, of course, pleas and tears, but Tiberius remained resolute. He had made up his mind, and there was no changing it. As they watched their friend step towards the portal, their hearts heavy with grief, they were struck by the profoundness of the sacrifice. Tiberius was willing to give his life, not for glory or power, but for love, for the sake of a friend. It was a lesson they would carry with them for the rest of their lives, that true strength lay not in power, but in the capacity to love and sacrifice for others. And so, with a final nod to his friends, Tiberius stepped into the portal, his form dissolving into the swirling vortex. The library was plunged into silence, the echoes of their friend's sacrifice lingering in the air. Just as they began to mourn, the silence was broken by a sound, a low rumbling sound, growing louder and louder until it was all they could hear. They turned towards the source of the noise, their hearts pounding in their chests. The library was shaking, books falling off shelves, dust raining down from the ceiling, and then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The portal was stable, a gateway to their friend, but at a terrible cost. The following morning, the sun beamed down its warm rays through the thick forest canopy, creating a mosaic of shadows and light that danced upon the forest floor. It had rained the previous night, and the earth was damp and fragrant with the musky scent of wet soil, leaves, and moss. The air was still cool, and the day promised to be bright and clear. Ava woke up first. She unzipped her tent and emerged, stretching and yawning. She always loved the mornings in the forest, the quietude, the smell of the earth, the chirping of the birds. It was as if the world was slowly awakening, shedding off its nocturnal cloak to embrace the day. But this morning was different. There was a tension in the air, an unease that couldn't be shrugged off. It didn't take her long to realize why. The fire, which should have been smoldering embers by now, was out, completely, as if it had been doused with water. A cold feeling settled in her stomach as she scanned the clearing. There was no sign of disturbance. Everything was as they had left it the previous night. She walked over to the fire pit and squatted next to it, her brow furrowed. The ashes were cold and damp. She touched them, rubbed them between her fingers. This wasn't right. This wasn't right at all. Ava looked around again, her heartbeat increasing. Suddenly, she felt very vulnerable, exposed. A shiver ran down her spine as a dreadful thought entered her mind. They were not alone in this forest. She rose, dusting off her hands, her eyes now scanning the surrounding forest more intently. The serene calmness of the morning had evaporated, replaced with an unnerving tension that seemed to hum in the air. She felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. Ava was not a stranger to the wilderness. She knew the dangers it held, the unpredictability of it. But this was something else, something that she could not put a finger on. It was a sensation of being watched, of an unwelcome presence lingering in the shadows. With a sense of unease growing within her, Ava decided to wake the others. She turned towards the tents and froze. The flap of her brother's tent was open. She ran over, her heart pounding in her chest. "Lucas," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. The tent was empty. His sleeping bag was still there, undisturbed. But Lucas was gone. A wave of panic washed over her. She turned around, her eyes scanning the campsite. "Lucas!" she shouted this time, her voice echoing through the silent forest. There was no reply, just the eerie silence of the forest answering her back. She tried to calm her racing heart, tried to think. He must have gone for a walk. Yes, that was it. Lucas loved his morning walks. But as she looked around the deserted campsite, the extinguished fire, the missing brother, Ava couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She had to find Lucas. She had to make sure he was safe. Grabbing a flashlight and her knife, Ava ventured into the heart of the forest. Her senses were on high alert. Every crunch of leaves under her feet, every rustle in the foliage above her causing her heart to race. "Lucas!" she called again, her voice wavering. The forest remained silent, seemingly holding its breath. She walked on, her flashlight cutting through the gloom of the forest, each step taking her further away from the familiarity of the campsite. As she went deeper into the woods, the sense of dread grew stronger. And then she heard it, a low, guttural growl echoing through the trees. It was far off but unmistakably predatory. A chill ran down Ava's spine. It wasn't just the sense of being watched anymore. There was something out there, something in the forest with them. As the sound of the growl faded, Ava found herself standing still, her heart pounding in her ears. She had to find Lucas. But where could he have gone? And why would he venture out alone, knowing the dangers? As Ava grappled with these questions, she noticed something on the ground, a set of footprints, fresh and deep. They led further into the forest, away from their camp. With a sinking feeling, she realized they were Lucas's. A mix of fear and determination filled her. She had to find her brother, and fast. Ignoring the growing terror in her heart, she followed the footprints deeper into the foreboding darkness. Ava's progress was slow, the darkness of the forest hampering her speed. She traced the footprints, stopping every now and then to ensure she was still on the right path. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound her own labored breathing and the crunch of leaves under her boots. It was then she saw it, a figure hunched over in the distance. A sense of relief washed over her. "Lucas!" she called out, quickening her pace, but as she neared, a paralyzing fear gripped her. The figure was much larger than Lucas, and it was covered in fur. Ava froze in place, her flashlight illuminating the creature. It was hunched over something, its back turned to Ava. Its growl was low and menacing, echoing through the silent forest. With a sudden rush of adrenaline, Ava grabbed her knife, her grip firm despite her trembling hands. She had to get the creature away from Lucas. She had to save her brother. She took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage she had. Then, with a wild yell, she lunged at the creature. It turned towards her, its eyes gleaming in the darkness. The creature was more massive up close than Ava had anticipated. Its fur was dark and matted, its eyes glowing with an eerie red light. It rose to its full height, towering over Ava, its growl deep and threatening. Ava froze for a moment, taken aback by the sheer size of the creature, but then she remembered Lucas. She remembered why she was there. With renewed determination, she tightened her grip on the knife and charged at the creature. The beast didn't move, its red eyes watching her calmly. It was only when Ava was a mere few feet away that it swiped at her with a massive paw. Ava ducked, narrowly avoiding the blow. She quickly regained her balance and lunged, plunging the knife into the creature's side. The beast roared in pain and anger, swiping at Ava again. This time she wasn't quick enough. She was thrown back by the force of the blow, her knife slipping from her grasp. Ava hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of her. She tried to get up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. She looked up at the creature, fear gripping her as she saw it slowly approach her. The realization that she might not make it out of the forest alive hit her hard. But then she remembered Lucas, remembered the look on his face when the creature had taken him. She couldn't give up, not yet. With a surge of adrenaline, Ava managed to push herself to her feet. She could feel a sharp pain in her side, but she ignored it. There was no time for pain, not when Lucas's life was on the line. She scanned the ground for her knife, spotting it a few feet away. She made a dash for it, but the creature was quicker. It stepped on the knife, effectively pinning it to the ground. Ava skidded to a halt, her heart pounding in her chest. The creature turned towards her, its red eyes glowing menacingly. Ava knew she didn't stand a chance against it without a weapon, but she refused to just stand there and wait for the end. She picked up a large rock from the ground and threw it at the creature. It hit the beast right in the eye. The creature roared in pain, rearing back and swiping blindly at the air. Seizing the opportunity, Ava ran towards the knife, managing to dislodge it from under the creature's foot. The creature was quick to recover, though, and it lunged at Ava just as she picked up the knife. Ava turned just in time, raising the knife in defense. The creature impaled itself on the blade, its momentum carrying it forward. Ava was pushed back by the force, falling to the ground with the creature on top of her. The forest fell silent. Ava pushed the creature off her, gasping for breath. She looked at the creature, its red eyes now dim. She had done it. She had defeated the creature. But there was no time to celebrate. She had to find Lucas. With newfound hope, Ava picked herself up and followed the creature's tracks deeper into the forest. With the adrenaline slowly leaving her body, Ava felt her injuries more acutely. A sharp pain throbbed from her side where the creature had clawed at her, and her limbs felt heavy. She knew she had to find help soon, or she might not make it. As Ava moved further into the dense forest, she came across a small clearing, and there at the edge of it was Lucas. He was lying on the ground, unmoving. Ava's heart pounded in her chest as she rushed over to him. "Lucas!" She fell to her knees beside him, her hand shaking as she checked for a pulse. It was there, faint and slow, but still there. Lucas was alive. Ava let out a sigh of relief, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, knowing that now was not the time for tears. Lucas needed her help. She looked around the clearing, her eyes landing on a small creek nearby. She knew she needed to clean Lucas's wounds to prevent infection. Dragging him towards the creek took every ounce of strength Ava had left. Once there, she used her torn shirt to clean his injuries. It was a painstaking process, and more than once she had to stop to catch her breath. Once she was done, Ava sat back on her heels, exhaustion washing over her. She looked at Lucas, his face pale under the moonlight. He needed medical attention, and he needed it soon. But they were miles away from the nearest town, and Ava didn't think she could carry Lucas all the way there. A sense of despair washed over her. She had come so far, had fought so hard, only to lose him now. As she sat there, staring at Lucas's unconscious form, a thought occurred to her. The creature had been drawn to them because of the artifact. Could it be that the artifact also held the key to saving Lucas? With that thought in mind, Ava reached into her pocket and pulled out the artifact. It was a small, golden orb, glowing faintly under the moonlight. As she held it in her hands, she felt a strange sense of warmth emanating from it. "I don't know if you can help us," Ava said softly, looking at the orb. "But right now, you're all we've got." As if in response, the orb started to glow brighter, its light enveloping Ava and Lucas. A feeling of calm washed over Ava as she held on to Lucas, praying for a miracle. And then, everything went black. When Ava woke, it was daylight. She squinted against the sun streaming through the trees, momentarily disoriented. Her side ached and her entire body felt heavy, but when she tried to move, she found she could. The pain was less intense, more manageable. Beside her, Lucas still lay unconscious. Ava turned to him, reaching out to feel his forehead. It was cool to the touch, his skin less pale than before. His breathing was steady, his pulse stronger. He seemed better. But how? Then she remembered the artifact and the strange light it had emitted. She looked around, searching for the small golden orb, and found it a few feet away. It was no longer glowing, just a simple piece of gold now, but she could still feel a faint warmth when she picked it up. Had the artifact healed them? Was that even possible? Ava shook her head, pushing the thought away. It didn't matter how or why. What mattered was that they were alive, but they weren't safe yet. They still needed to find their way back to civilization. Pushing herself to her feet, Ava looked around, trying to figure out their location. The forest was dense, the foliage thick. She couldn't see the path they had taken to reach here. Knowing that she couldn't carry Lucas, Ava made the decision to leave him behind while she searched for help. She hesitated, not liking the idea of leaving him alone and vulnerable, but there was no other choice. Leaving Lucas with the artifact and a promise to return as soon as possible, Ava set off into the forest. Her steps were shaky at first, but as she moved, her strength returned. She kept moving, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. The forest seemed endless, the trees stretching as far as she could see. She moved in what she hoped was the direction of the nearest town, praying that she was right. As she walked, Ava couldn't help but think about their journey so far. They had faced challenges and dangers, had been pushed to their limits, but they had also learned valuable lessons. The most important one, Ava realized, was that no matter how dire the circumstances, there was always a way out. You just needed to be brave enough to find it. With renewed determination, Ava picked up her pace. She would find help. She would save Lucas. They would get out of this forest alive. And then, just when she was starting to lose hope, Ava saw it, a small cabin in the distance. Smoke was rising from the chimney, and she could hear the faint sound of a dog barking. Relief washed over her. They were saved. As she started towards the cabin, a strange feeling overcame her. She felt a sudden chill, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. A sense of dread filled her, and she instinctively knew that something was wrong. She turned around, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to get back to Lucas. She needed to... And then she saw it, the creature. It was back, and it was heading straight for the clearing where she had left Lucas. Ava's breath hitched in her throat. She was too far away. She wouldn't make it in time. The creature would reach Lucas before she could. And just like that, Ava was running, the cabin and its promise of safety forgotten. All that mattered was getting back to Lucas. She had to save him. She had to. Despite the pain in her side and the fatigue that had begun to creep back in, Ava forced herself to run faster. Branches whipped against her face, leaving stinging welts, but she barely noticed. All she could think about was Lucas, defenseless and alone. As she neared the clearing, she heard the creature before she saw it. A low growl echoed through the forest, followed by a pained cry. Lucas. Ava's heart pounded in her chest, terror seizing her. But when she burst into the clearing, the sight that greeted her wasn't what she expected. The creature was there, yes, but so was Lucas, standing on unsteady feet, the artifact clutched tightly in his hand. It was glowing again, a bright, blinding light that made the creature recoil. Seeing Ava, Lucas shouted, "Stay back!" Ava skidded to a halt, watching in disbelief as Lucas moved to stand between her and the creature. The artifact was glowing brighter now, the light pulsating. The creature growled, its eyes on the orb, but it didn't move closer. Instead, it suddenly turned and fled into the forest. Ava stared after it, stunned. Then she turned to Lucas. "How did you—" Lucas shook his head, looking just as confused. "I don't know. I woke up and it was here. I knew I had to protect you." Ava moved closer, taking in Lucas's pale face and the way he was swaying on his feet. "You need to rest," she said. "We need to get you to that cabin." Lucas nodded, allowing Ava to support him as they began the slow journey towards the cabin. As they walked, Ava kept glancing back at the forest, half expecting the creature to return. But there was nothing, only the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of a river. They were safe, for now. The profound lesson was simple, but it was one that Ava would never forget. Courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about being afraid and doing what had to be done anyway. Lucas had shown that today, and Ava knew that she would be forever grateful for his bravery. But as they finally reached the cabin and the promise of safety it held, Ava couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. The creature was still out there, and as long as it was, they were still in danger. That realization was a cold knot in her stomach, a grim reminder that their ordeal was far from over. And as she helped Lucas into the cabin, she knew that the next few days would be a test of their strength and resilience. But for now, they were safe, and that was enough. We've now come to the end of this chapter. Please stay tuned for the next chapter of this story to be published in the upcoming days. In the meantime, please enjoy the sleep music that's about to begin.